Hello, I'm John McCormick, Director of E-Learning Design within the Department of E-Learning and Instructional Support. This is part 2 of a 2-video series. In part 1, I discussed ways of thinking about and planning for online blended learning. In this part 2, I discussed multiple examples of patterns of blended learning activities and individual learning activities that integrate both environments. In addition to examples of learning activities, I talk a bit about various instructional technology tools used to support those learning patterns and learning activities. The examples begin with more simple, generic cases of integration of the two environments and become more detailed and complex as we move along. Please pause the video on some of the denser slides so you can review. I won't linger for a longer time as I would in a live presentation. I often say that instructional technology tools are pedagogy-agnostic. That is, with few exceptions, most tools do not match directly with a specific teaching strategy. So it's very often impossible to answer the question, what should I use that tool for, without some detailed information about the learning activity and goals of that learning. Many tools or combinations of tools can be used for many different pedagogical purposes. The tool selection ideally comes after considering information about learning goals and details of the learning activities. Here are some useful questions to ask yourself or discuss with colleagues when choosing tools. You want to be clear about the goals of the learning and how you will know students have learned. Where will you see evidence of learning? Walking yourself or others through the learning activity in some detail can really help to both clarify the goals and evidence and choose the best tools. These are the actions that instructional designers most frequently take at the outset of planning. Regarding tools, there's a bit of chicken and the egg conundrum in that it's hard to know how to choose tools without knowing what they're capable of. If you watched part 1 of this video series, you might remember this strategy just-in-time teaching. The strategy suggests that you plan asynchronous time with the live classroom time in mind so that you can use information about student learning to inform and plan the design of the live class time. As I mentioned in the first video, it's important to make sure that you have evidence of student learning and thinking in the asynchronous environment in order to make this strategy work. If students are doing only passive learning, for example, reading an article or watching a video, you will have no information about student learning to help you plan. Activities that require evidence that students process content might be individual, group, or whole class. For example, self-assessments, posting answers to questions in a journal, asking questions, having discussions with classmates, group work, and so on. Here is a basic pattern starting in the asynchronous environment. Students viewing a recorded lecture or other content, which I'll describe as passive learning. Now, it may not be passive. Students may take notes, they may ask themselves questions, and so on. However, we don't have evidence of that processing. Following this are small group discussions with whole class debrief in the synchronous environment. Here I've added a second, more active learning task or tasks, the knowledge check, which could be a self-assessment quiz or journal post or a discussion. This discussion shown uses a feature in MyLeslie that disallows viewing others' posts until that student posts first. The posting and review of classmates' posts and the synthesis of that information can be posted as well or shared privately with the instructor. So this constitutes evidence of learning that can help you plan the synchronous session as we saw in the model of the just-in-time teaching strategy. It can also help you discover gaps in knowledge and misunderstandings. In the synchronous session, small group discussions and debrief can push students to go deeper into the content. Here I've highlighted the active learning components, which are most critical to this process. These engage students in processing the content in some way, as I said. For example, applying concepts in the recorded lecture to a discussion question prompt in the asynchronous environment. That prompt could pose a problem, scenario, case study, or ask the students to consider their own practice in light of the concepts learned. You might also remember this graphic showing that this cycle can continue, moving from synchronous to asynchronous and back. Integrating the use of each environment so active learning and evidence of learning occurs in both is ideal. This shows an example of such a pattern, starting in this case in the asynchronous environment. While you could welcome students to class in the live environment, students often check into the MyLeslie course sites before classes begin. Starting in the asynchronous environment with a welcome video can be an engaging way to begin that journey. But adding an icebreaker that incorporates a question or two about students' goals for taking the course, along with more social content, can help you get to know students prior to the first live session. The synchronous session could then move to some sort of team building activity, perhaps around course goals. You could also briefly discuss the first module's content. Think here of a module as a time unit measured in a week or multiple weeks. In the case of courses that last less than a week or so, the unit might be a day, especially for intense weekend courses that meet traditionally for 2 or more full days. This live session includes the beginning stages of a case study. Live time can also be useful for group planning. Finally, on returning to the asynchronous environment, students can continue to work in groups on the case study. This pattern is intended to show only one of an endless variety of ways of integrating learning across environments. Here are a few brief examples, and then we'll move on to a few examples of discourse tools, and then to more detailed examples of learning activities. Discussions can start asynchronously in MyLeslie and continue in the live class. The different strengths of each environment can align with students' different strengths in thinking and discussion. Some students do well in live discussions. Others shine in asynchronous text-based discussions, or even recorded voice discussion in tools like VoiceThread. Students can review a recorded short lecture by you or another expert, followed by live class interaction. Again, it's better if students are asked to process and share in some way their thinking around the lecture content before the live session. Finally, students can record a presentation, classmates could review those and then post questions for the presenters in a discussion forum. The presenters could then answer those questions posted in live sessions, and more Q&A could follow. This last example can save significant live classroom time while retaining live interaction and allowing for reflection time for both presenters and those classmates listening. I'm breaking for a few slides from examples of teaching and learning patterns to focus a bit more on tools, in this case, asynchronous discourse tools. Discussion forums are part of the MyLeslie learning management system. VoiceThread is a tool that is integrated with MyLeslie but not part of it. And Flipgrid is a Microsoft product Leslie owns as part of Office 365 that can be embedded within your course site. Just a general quick note on online discussions. Engaging online discussions can be challenging to design and plan for. It is easy and common to use ineffective discussion prompts which may work well in the face-to-face discussions. I won't go into detail on design on online discussions, but we have several good and concise resources to guide design and facilitation of online discussions. Going beyond discussing readings or answering questions that read like short essay questions is important to consider. This example shows an asynchronous discussion in which the initial post is a student video of some kind with text responses from classmates. The student image and names are blacked out for privacy. Kaltura can be used for the video with the discussion board tool to organize the text responses. This is an example of Flipgrid use in our online and hybrid course design seminar. The assignment is for each instructor to give a very brief elevator pitch of no more than 90 seconds on a habit of mind or way of thinking in their field or subject area. While this tool can record audio, it is not meant for detailed back and forth discussion. Finally, this example shows an introductory activity in VoiceThread. This is also part of our online and hybrid course design seminar. This single slide has multiple questions participants can answer to the whole group and/or respond directly to selected participants with video, voice, or text. This tool has been used quite effectively for group presentations and feedback. It can also be used for recorded lectures. Let's return to more examples. This slide is a summary of a full description of a group analysis activity. This starts in the asynchronous environment and ends in the live environment with Q&A. This illustrates the pattern for that activity. Student groups in the first step could use the group tool in MyLeslie, which can be populated by the instructor with a wiki, a discussion board, and/or a Collaborate Ultra. So, students can choose both asynchronous or synchronous tools with which to collaborate. Presentation can then happen in the live class, followed by a debrief. This example involves posting a presentation in a discussion forum and feedback or comments from classmates in the same forum. Earlier you saw how this might appear in MyLeslie. You can see details here that I won't repeat, but there are some additional details that might be added to this. For example, guidelines on postings, interaction, and grading. Here is a pattern shown for that activity. Now I've broken from the pattern of showing an integration of asynchronous and synchronous This pattern is entirely asynchronous, but there certainly is always an option and used very frequently in traditional online courses. This is an example of using the discussion board for debate, which can be used as a way to apply knowledge and argumentation skills. Engaging discussion activities usually go beyond a simple discussion of a reading, but have well thought out design and instructions. This activity includes a preparation phase and a phase for the debate. You can see the debate here divided into 3 parts. The next slide describes the preparation phase. And here is a very brief visual summary of the debate activity. The preparation phase can happen asynchronously and/or synchronously within student groups, according to their needs. The actual debate takes place in a discussion forum or forums. This final example is lengthier, more complicated, and a bit challenging, but I wanted to include it for a few reasons. First, it's an example from a Leslie instructor who teaches in all environments. Second, it uses an active learning strategy that leads to important lifelong skills development in students. Most importantly, the ability to use critical judgment to evaluate their own and others' work. So a group of Leslie instructors and staff have been researching student peer review and applying that research to practice for over 4 years in both online and face-to-face instruction and across multiple disciplines. So there is significant expertise at Leslie to assist in developing peer review activities for blended or online environments. You can certainly reach out to me and I can assist, or I can connect you with multiple faculty to assist you. This is a creative writing course with the final product of a 10-minute screenplay. You can see the focus is not only on content-related skills, but also on feedback or critique skills. There are 2 assignments, and both are related to a second draft of the screenplay. Notice the instructor's role. This first assignment focuses on written feedback, and the second on verbal synchronous feedback on that same draft. Scheduling those synchronous meetings is explained in the second paragraph. As background information for you, this is the peer review protocol. It was developed by the Leslie peer review team. It includes 3 steps. The first step, pre-peer review, is very important for later success of the process. Here, instructors explain the benefits to students and how to overcome barriers in peer review. Barriers include poor feedback, a lack of understanding of benefits, and social-emotional issues students encounter, such as anxiety around the process. Benefits include many lifelong learning skills, including a key one, the ability to critically judge one's own and others' work. These assignments primarily focus on the second step, the peer review itself. The final step involves the revision process. Here is a visual showing the written and oral feedback steps within the box with the dashed lines. Assignment 1 takes place asynchronously. This is written feedback on the draft, followed by assignment number 2, taking place synchronously and collaborate. Finally, after these 2 assignments, the third protocol step, revision, takes place. The next slide provides some key pedagogical elements. I discussed number 1 as a key to preparing students for the process in the last slide. The second point is critical in order to have the author drive the feedback. This also helps in creating a sense of responsibility. Students are more likely to use feedback when the feedback addresses their own goals. Third, using a set of criteria that incorporates important content-related quality indicators will help guide the feedback. Fourth, the live meeting is intended to clarify and deepen dialogue around the work. Finally, the last step closes the loop by asking authors to briefly discuss what feedback they used and why. This helps make visual the thinking of the author. If the synchronous meeting is recorded, this can give additional information about students' ability to give and use feedback. This visual highlights that the author drives the feedback process, and that documenting that process and the thinking makes learning visible to the instructor. This is a list of general criteria for effective feedback. This is not related to content or subject areas, but it is applicable to all subject areas. Thank you for listening. Here are just 2 ways to get more resources about this or any other topic related to teaching and learning online.